You've definitely heard the name Vijay Mallya, but the number you really need to know is over 9,000 crore rupees. We're talking more than $1 billion, and this wasn't his money. It was public money, loaned to one man who would become India's most famous fugitive. So how did this all happen? Let's get into it.
And this quote, man, it really gets to the heart of why people are so angry, right? It just perfectly captures that feeling of injustice, that sense that there's one set of rules for the common person and a completely different set for the ultra-rich. It really frames this whole saga perfectly.
So that is the big question, isn't it? How did one guy borrow all that money, a truly staggering amount, just not pay it back, and then leave the country? This isn't just a simple story of a business that went belly up. No, this is a tale of massive ambition, really questionable decisions, powerful connections, and a wild escape that left India's biggest banks holding the bag. So how did he do it?
Okay, so to really understand how it all came crashing down, we've got to go back to the beginning. We need to understand the empire. See, Vijay Mallya wasn't some rags to riches story. Not at all. He was born into immense wealth, inheriting a business built from the ground up by his very sharp and very careful father.
And that foundation was rock solid. His father, Vijay Mallya, was a business genius. He took the reins of the UB Group right when India became independent and just started gobbling up competitors, methodically building a hugely profitable empire, piece by piece. I mean, just picture this for a second. While other kids were outside playing, a young Vijay Mallya was driving these little battery-powered cars that most people in India hadn't even seen before. That tells you everything you need to know, doesn't it? It's a life of just unbelievable privilege, a world away from the reality of everyday Indians, and it definitely shaped his whole outlook on life, and maybe his tolerance for risk. All right, so fast forward. Vijay takes the reins, and he is not his father. He wasn't interested in just quietly managing the family business. No way. He wanted to make a huge splash. He wasn't just building a brand, he was creating a lifestyle, and he put himself right at the center of it as the king of good times. So in 1983, when he takes over at just 28 years old after his father's sudden death, the company's turnover is around 350 crores. And you can bet there were a lot of people in the boardroom thinking, can this flashy young guy really fill his father's shoes? Well, he was about to give them a spectacular answer. And you've got to give him credit. In the beginning, the guy was sharp. He really understood the market. First, he figured out that people wanted a stronger beer for the same price. Boom, Kingfisher Strong is born, and demand goes through the roof. Then he looked at costs. Glass bottles? They break. They're expensive. He switched to cans. Simple, but genius. And then he built out this incredible distribution network that just ran circles around the competition. But he had a huge problem. You can't advertise alcohol in India. So what did he do? This is where his real genius came in. It's called surrogate marketing. He put the Kingfisher name on everything but beer. Kingfisher water, Kingfisher soda, a famous horse race, and of course, the legendary Kingfisher swimsuit calendar. It became this cultural icon. Suddenly, Kingfisher wasn't just a beer. It was this glamorous, high-flying lifestyle. And the result of all this? Absolutely staggering. Remember that 350 crore turnover he inherited? He blew that out of the water, growing the UB Group's valuation to a massive 6,000 crores. All those early critics were silenced. By every single measure, he was a phenomenal success. But that success, it fueled a much, much bigger ambition. And this is where the story takes a sharp turn. This is the pivot from success story to a massive cautionary tale. Mallya decided to get into the airline industry, one of the toughest, most expensive businesses in the world. It was his dream project, but it would become the anchor that dragged his entire empire down. And you just have to appreciate the sheer ego of this move. This wasn't some carefully researched business plan. He apparently launched the airline as a birthday present for his son. I mean, can you believe that? He dropped 400 crores of his own cash to kick it off. Right from the start, this wasn't just a business, it was a vanity project. So, to see why this was such a disaster waiting to happen, you have to look at the market back then. You had two totally different models. On one side, Kingfisher Airlines, pure luxury in the sky, screens, gourmet food, the whole five-star experience, with incredibly high costs. And on the other side, you had Air Deccan,
No frills, profitable, and it understood the one thing Indian travelers wanted most: cheap tickets. So Mallya wants to fly internationally, but there's a rule that his airline has to be 5 years old. It wasn't. But Air Deccan was. So he bought it. And here is where he made an absolutely fatal mistake. His ego couldn't handle owning a cheap airline, so he rebranded it, started adding all the expensive Kingfisher services, and jacked up the prices. He completely destroyed With the airline now just hemorrhaging cash, the story shifts from bad business decisions to, well, something much darker. This is the chapter where the massive loans start, where valuations get inflated, and where the lines between business, politics, and outright deceit get really, really blurry. So how much did he borrow? Over 7,000 crore rupees. Let that sink in. Borrowed from a group of 17 banks, with the State Bank of India leading the way. And you have to realize he wasn't borrowing against real assets or profits. He was borrowing to plug the giant holes in his failing airline, taking on staggering amounts of public money to do it. So you might be wondering, how on earth did he get a loan for a failing company? Well, this right here, this is the heart of the whole thing. The bank's own internal team valued the Kingfisher brand at about 160 crores. But then an external firm, Grant Thornton, came in and poof, said it was worth 4,100 crores. And the banks used that crazy number as a reason to lend him thousands of crores. The punchline? When they finally tried to sell the brand to get some money back, its real value was zero. No one would buy it. And this is what really made the public so angry. You have to look at these two parallel realities. In one reality, the company was falling apart. Employees weren't getting paid, checks to suppliers were bouncing, taxes weren't paid. A total mess. But in Mallya's reality, life was great. He was throwing huge birthday parties, buying an IPL team, living this incredibly lavish lifestyle, all while his empire was crumbling on the back of public money. And even as things were going completely south, Mallya was busy strengthening his political defenses. In 2010, he gets himself elected as a member of parliament for the second time. And many people believe this political influence is a huge reason why the banks kept lending him money, and why nobody put a stop to it all much, much sooner. So with the airline officially grounded and the banks finally declaring him a defaulter, the legal walls started closing in fast. But just when it looked like he was cornered, Mallya pulled off his final and most audacious act, the Great Escape. Okay, just look at the sequence of events, because it's unbelievable. October 2015, the CBI issues a detain notice, basically stop him if he tries to leave the country. But a month later, that notice gets mysteriously changed to just inform us if he travels. Then, on March 1st, 2016, the banks are literally in court trying to seize his passport. And the very next day, he calmly boards a flight to London with 55 suitcases. And just like that, he was gone. Now, there's a key legal term here, willful defaulter. This isn't just someone who can't pay their bills. No, what the banks are saying is that he had the capacity to repay the loan, or at least part of it, but he actively chose not to. They argue he was diverting money to shell companies and personal properties instead of paying his debts. And that pretty much brings us up to today. Mallya is still in the UK. While he's been arrested there, he has used every legal trick in the book to fight being sent back to India to face trial. All the while, the banks are still stuck in court, trying to claw back whatever little they can from his assets. So we're left with this huge, lingering question. Every now and then, Mallya tweets offers to pay back the principal loan amount, but the legal battles just drag on. The whole thing forces all of us to wonder about the system itself. How accountable are the powerful? And when public money on this scale just vanishes, will it ever really find its way back?